Well, will the U.S. deal with the Assad regime diplomatically, or will we still go and use military force? It's a big question today. The answer is not clear. Fast-moving developments. We have a lot of headlines coming into our newsroom that we're trying to confirm for you. In the meantime, the Obama administration officials are saying that we will continue to push ahead in making a case for a strike, at least on Capitol Hill. In the meantime, the crisis on the ground in Syria continues to rage. More than 100,000 people are dead in this civil war. It's been going on for 2 years. Jihadist fighters are pouring into the country from all over the world. And someone that knows this better than most is our next guest. Martin Chulov is our Middle East correspondent for The Guardian. He's made 13 trips inside Syria over the last 2 years, and he just left the country after spending 5 days there. So, Martin, just tell us a little bit about why you found this trip to be one of the most interesting of your 13.
Well, I hadn't been for a couple of months, and the main reason for going back this time was to really take the temperature, really to assess what is the nature of the opposition getting towards the end of 2013. In the previous trips I'd been there had not been a significant jihadi presence. This time there was. There was clearly a new and emboldened group of extremists. I certainly wouldn't put them as a majority, nothing near a majority, but they were exercising power that was disproportionate to their numbers. They were attempting to hold sway in towns and villages all around the Aleppo province. They were being very reluctantly hosted by majorities, more or less mainstream community, and it was clear that their presence, their visibility was far more potent than been at any point in my previous trips to Syria.
We talk a lot about stories domestically. We'll say, well, what does the average American think? And that's something that we'll talk about on the news. You were able to interact with average Syrian families. What are they thinking on the ground?
Well, they're deeply resentful of the extremists. They believe that they don't reflect the goals of the revolution. They don't reflect the values of their society. They are attempting to hold sway by imposing some sort of Sharia law. They are flying their flags above numerous civic buildings, outside schoolhouses, and above mosques. They don't want the jihadist groups there. But by the same token, there is very little they can do about it at this point. The mainstream opposition military is deeply engaged in a fight to the death with the Assad regime army. It would be destructive to both sides, the opposition, the mainstreamers and the jihadists, if they were to fight each other at this point. But there is a deep and abiding hostility between both of them. But for now, they've been able to stop from going at each other.
You tell some interesting anecdotes in your writing. One of them, just recently, you were talking about a restaurant around Aleppo where there were some opposition forces of different groups, all sort of sharing the same restaurant, rifles on the table that the waiters were moving away so they could place the food down for them to eat. And I'm wondering, in that type of situation, what the chatter is like about a U.S. military strike, and what is the effect of this talk here in the United States on the ground in Syria?
Well, that was a really interesting late lunch we had at that restaurant, because as you could imagine, the chatter of the U.S. strike was everywhere. The mainstream opposition were all for it. They were very enthusiastic about it, saying that we haven't had help from an ally in good faith at any point in the last couple of years. Let's bring it on. I wish we could give the Americans some targets to attack, including their headquarters and bases of the jihadists, who are only 10 meters away down the other end of the room. We were able to speak to them very briefly, although it's difficult to do that. But it was clear that they had a very different view. They believed that any attack that was being planned against the Assad regime was really a pretext to attack them. Many of them had fought in Iraq. They said they knew what to expect from the American Air Force. It was a far more formidable foe than the Syrian Air Force had been over the last couple of years, and they said they'd been evacuating their bases, they'd been moving personnel to farms and factories, they'd been hiding their big guns, and they were genuinely laying low at the moment, waiting for what they thought was another round with an old enemy.
I only have 30 seconds here, Martin, but what do you think is something that the American president tonight will say that could potentially have the most impact on the situation in Syria? Can anything be said at this point?
It's very difficult to actually calm things down on the opposition front at the moment. We spoke to people of the mainstream opposition this morning. They were disappointed that any airstrikes that had been planned are probably not on the table for now. All Obama could say, which would appease them, would be that they are that the US is indeed right behind them and that it will continue to support them materially, not just morally.
Martin, it's great to have your insight. We really appreciate it. We look forward to having you back on the program. Thank you very much.